A reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. Rise up in splendor, Jerusalem. Your light has come. The glory of the Lord shines upon you. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick clouds cover the peoples. But upon you the Lord shines, and over you appears his glory. Nations shall walk by your light, and kings by your shining radiance. Raise your eyes and look about. They all gather and come to you, your sons from afar and your daughters in the arms of their nurses. Then you shall be radiant at what you see. Your heart shall throb and overflow, for the riches of the sea shall be emptied out before you. The wealth of nations shall be brought to you. Caravans of camels shall fill you, dromedaries from Midian and Ephah. All from Sheba shall come, bearing gold and frankincense, and proclaiming the praises of the Lord. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Ephesians. Brothers and sisters, you have heard of the stewardship of God's grace that was given to me for your benefit, namely, that the mystery was made known to me by revelation. It was not made known to people in other generations. It has now been revealed to his holy apostles and prophets by the Spirit, that the Gentiles are co-heirs, members of the same body, and co-partners in the promise in Christ Jesus through the gospel. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Our reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising, and have come to do him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Assembling all the chiefs, priests, and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea. For thus it has been written through the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. Since from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people, Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and ascertained from them the time of the star's appearance. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the child. When you have found him, bring me the word, that I too may go and do him homage." After their audience with the king, they set out, and behold, the star that they had seen at its rising preceded them, until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. They were overjoyed at seeing the star, and on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They prostrated themselves and did him homage, then opened their treasures and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their country by another way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. We all get the spiritual blues sooner or later, and it comes and it goes. The spiritual blues when we kind of wonder, is God really with us, for us? Does God want to bless us and keep us? Does God want to be gracious to us and make his face to shine upon us and lead us to peace? The great saints in our tradition, many of them, have really delved into this question of the way in which the spiritual blues work. They have all different words for it. St. Ignatius talks about in desolation. St. John of the Cross talks about a subset of the dark night. St. Teresa talks about the early interior mansions, that you can't get to the deeper ones. Everybody, John the Curé of Ars was all about it. We get the blues. And when you get the spiritual blues, you're not really sure if God is really all that God's cracked up to be, right? If God really loves you the way God is alleged to love you. Sometimes it's a short dose, sometimes it's a big period, right? Sometimes some little thing can set it off, and so it was for Teresa of Avila, one of the truly, truly greatest saints in the history of the church. Really spunky lady who went on to become, well, she didn't study for it, but she was later named one of the doctors of the church, one of the first female doctors of the church. So there she was on a day like yesterday, not as cold as today, but as the report goes, it was a day like yesterday. She was heading up into the hills to take care of some business up there at a convent about which she needed to make a decision. And she's on her way up this mountain and has to cross a stream. The horse goes through the stream. She gets halfway through the stream. The horse rears. She goes in the soup. It's like 30 degrees and miserable. She crawls her way, claws out of the stream. And the two other sisters who were still on the early side of the stream were really quite flabbergasted, as the story goes, that they saw her shake her hand at heaven, the holiest woman they knew. She shakes her hand at heaven and she says, "You know what, God? If this is the way you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few." Huh? And she's one of the great saints in the history of the church, and she's allowed to have that kind of an attitude toward God once in a while. But as the story goes on to say that she realized that she was in no state to make a big choice about the future of this convent up in the hills. And that until that wore off, until she got out of that case of the spiritual blues, you know how it is, that wasn't the end of the world, but it was just maybe that proverbial straw. And so you wait till you get out of the blues and then make the choice about what to do with the sisters up on the hill. What's it got to do with the Feast of the Epiphany? As I say, the Feast of the Epiphany is all about the word going forth. The centrality of that second reading today about the Gentiles and the Jews are all part of the story. But the backstory is in each of the readings today that, you know what, it was the people who were going through the blues, and God was asking them, please don't make any big changes while you're going through the blues. Don't do it. Wait until the sunshine comes back. Wait until you're feeling better about the world. Because whatever choice you make when you're in desolation it will probably not be the most inspired choice you could make. So in the first reading today, Isaiah 60, this is the story of the triumphant return to Jerusalem. It's the story of Isaiah really trying to talk the people into having confidence in what's in store. And whenever you hear this story about, okay, Jerusalem's going to be terrific, the whole backstory of that is during the Babylonian exile when the people had been deported from both Israel and Judah over to Babylon. Once they got to Babylon, they really hated it there. But you know what? They got used to it. And they got a terrible case of the spiritual blues. And after a while, they started to thinking, well, this is awful, but do we really want to go back to Jerusalem? Do we really want to schlep all the way across the desert? Do we really want to expose ourselves to the possibilities of thirst and dying of starvation and wild animals and Moabites and Hittites and Amorites and all the rest of them? Maybe we should just stay here. And so Isaiah tries over and over and over again to tell them, both during the exile, and it's a little bit confused about who wrote what when, but it all gets back to the exile and their underlying question, should we stay or should we go? In Babylon, they experienced acute desolation. They were in a severe case of the spiritual blues. They laid down their harps and wept. That's not the time to make a big decision about whether to stay or to go back. Whatever was your choice before you got the blues, stick with that choice. If it's at all possible, postpone any decisions. Stick with your choice as it was before you got the blues. Before you got the blues, you knew you wanted to live on Mount Zion. You knew that was God's holy mountain. You knew that's where you wanted to be. Don't commit yourself to doing something else. Don't do it while you got the blues. Don't do it. In the gospel today, we have the story of King Herod, who and I had to go back, and I thought I misquoted a vital statistic about him today. So I went back, and I was wrong about being wrong. I was actually right. This afternoon, I had to check a statistic about him. Do you know what a rotten person he was? I mean, he was pretty rotten. He built the big temple. He did all that. He resurrected the port over at Caesarea Maritima. He built what's the place up on the hill where nobody can get to him? Masada. He built the fortress at Masada. He built all this stuff. He did terrific things for Israel. But he was miserable. He was awful. He had to take 2,000 bodyguards with him when he went out in public. There's just not that many people in Israel, I'm sorry. If you've done something that makes you need 2,000 bodyguards, you're pretty rotten. And with all that building that he did, so he builds Herod's great temple, and then he takes a big Roman eagle and puts it over the front door to appease the Romans. That went over really big, let me tell you. In addition to building the temple, he went up there to the top right, to the northeast section of Israel, and he built a couple of really nice temples to the pagan gods just to keep them happy. He wasn't much into his religion. He really beat the dust out of the people, paying for all those gigantic building projects and setting a really terrible example. They had every reason to have the spiritual blues in a big way when he occupied the throne. He couldn't have been more rotten. And as a matter of fact, if there's any residual doubt about how rotten he was, what did he do after the wise men went home the other way? Went and had all the babies killed. That gives you about as much as you need to know about how awful he was, how oppressive he was, and how terrible it was for the people living under his heel. Rough stuff. Of course, people had a lot of the blues. Big time blues. God, if you love us so much, why did you bring us back here? This is, several years after, decades, century, after they come back from the exile. But Lord, is this really the best you can do? Is this loser? And he's always trying to cajole the people. What's that old thing my Jewish cousins say? Think Yiddish, look British, huh? That he's trying to tell the people, what you really need to do here is act, observe the Jewish stuff, but don't get too serious about it. These Roman gods, they got something to say, and the Romans are our friends if we just treat them right. They're misunderstood. So there's always that subtle pressure. Convert. Worship the eagle. And in the state of desperation they experienced, it would have made sense for a few of them to go in that direction. But we find a lot of resistance, people having the presence of mind, don't make a major change. Like, don't convert from Judaism to paganism when you have a severe case of the spiritual blues. And so it is with each one of us, huh? Wondering about when is the right time to make a choice and not to make a choice. God's favor rests on you. Yeah, there are certain times when it's easy to believe that. It's easy to believe in certain circumstances that God wants to bless you and keep you and be gracious to you and make his face to shine upon you. God wants to lead your footsteps in the pathways of peace. Right. Just look at the evidence of life. It's all true. And then we go through those moments when life gives us every reason to have the spiritual blues. When faith and hope and charity aren't in such great supply in our souls. When we truly wonder, what's God up to? Do we overestimate God's love and all that? And listen, we don't try to talk people out of it when they're going through that. We want to make sure they're staying in touch with reality. But come on, the best saints among us get the spiritual blues. Mother Teresa got a wicked case of the spiritual blues. The little flower got the spiritual blues. The big flower, Teresa of Avila, she got the blues. And the great thing about them is that you look at every one of those ladies, and it seems they generally had the presence of mind, don't make a major choice when you got the blues. Because the choice you'll make will probably be the wrong one. So what about us? I'd ask you to think it through in terms of the ways in which you many people in church tonight are given that sacred duty to take care of loved ones who are going through a rough patch, maybe physically with, advanced years or something like that. You know how it is sometimes, if you really give yourself to that project, sometimes it seems the rest of the world isn't cooperating, right? Like you're doing all you can to give your loved one a good life, and then your brother-in-law comes in and walks off with a TV set from mom's house. Like, what is with that, right? Right? You get the blues. Is that the time to make a big choice about the best way to care for mom? Absolutely not. Can you postpone it? If you can, please do. Jesus has a big opinion about that. What about during career stuff? Yeah, and it's a self-perpetuating thing, yeah? That the job kind of stinks. I don't really like going there. It leads me to a place of, it's not just a spiritual thing, but it's also a spiritual thing. Is that the time to make a major commitment to sell everything and move to Albuquerque? Probably not. Sometimes with really important relationships, it's the same way. Most of you probably had experiences of just the old, the old way of saying. In our house, it wasn't, pay attention to St. Teresa of Avila or pay attention to the children of the... No, it was don't make a decision when you're tired. Go to bed and think about it. Don't make a decision when you're angry. Don't make a decision, everybody has their little list. But on the Feast of the Epiphany, the background story in Isaiah and in the Gospel is people who had the presence of mind. Don't make a choice when you got the blues. Is there some place in life right now where you're really tempted to make a big choice? And our tradition tells us, hold off if you possibly can. Is there someone in your life about whom you care very much, and they're about to make a great big choice? And who knows, maybe the choice they make when they get back to the sunshine is going to be the same one they would have made under the thick clouds that Isaiah talks about, but maybe not. Lord, if this is the way you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few. It happens to all of us. Maybe you're feeling that. Maybe somebody you love is feeling that. And that's totally cool. It happens. What's not cool is making a big choice when we're feeling all that stuff. You get knocked in the stream, you come out, you say some tough words to God, and then you keep your wits about you. I'm not going to make that choice right now. Where do you need to remember that? Or maybe to gently remind someone else? Jesus seems to care deeply about when in our cycle of the spiritual life it's the right time to make a big choice. Where do you go with that? So it's about when to make a choice and when not. And there are times in our spiritual life, in the inevitable ebb and flow, in the inevitable change of got the blues, got the sunshine, got the blues, got the sunshine. Don't make choices down here. It's really a temptation. It gets us stuck in Babylon too easily. It makes us jump the gun to paganism too easily. But it's not just about our religion. It's about our professions, our teams, our majors, our colleges, or whatever else it is. Where's there a place where you feel inclined to make a big choice? But if you have the blues, don't do it. And where might you need to share that news with somebody else?